Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my December TBR to discuss. This is my to-be-read pile of books that I intend to read in the month of December. This does not mean I am guaranteed to read all of these books, nor does it mean that they'll all get done right at the end of December, nor does it mean that there are books on this list, or that, there could be books that I don't end up reading on this list, or books that I do end up reading that aren't on this list. So this is just my intended to-be-read list. Intended. And, you know, my reading lists change, my interests change. Some months are fantasy heavy, some are sci-fi, Star Trek, Star Wars heavy. It just depends. The month of November was very Star Wars and fantasy heavy, but the month of December is very science fiction heavy with a little bit of Star Trek, which I put in two different categories. So here's how I split them up. I have 4 sci-fi novels, 2 Star Trek novels, one of which is a new release. I have 1 mystery novel, 1 contemporary novel, and 1 horror novel. So why don't we get into those? So let's start with the darkest, deep, the most horrifying book I have on my list, and that is The Violence by Delilah Dawson. This is a book that I saw on bookshelves and saw the cover, and I was like, that's a cool cover. And then I saw who wrote it, and I was like, oh, that's Delilah Dawson. I've read some of her books. I loved her Star Wars books that she wrote, Phasma and Black Spire. I also really liked her YA series, Hit and Strike. I thought that even though I didn't like these books, the Tales of Pell books that she did with Kevin Hearn were wild and entertaining. So I was very eager to pick up more books from her, and she can write in like all the genres: adult, young adult, middle grade, horror, fantasy, sci-fi, comedy. She can do all of them. And this is her like serious like attempt at writing like an awards contender horror novel. And this is currently up for the Goodreads Choice Awards. And I got the book back in August when I went to go meet Delilah Dawson, and she signed my copy. And I am very excited to read it, even though I think I'm not going to love it. You know, this is dealing with very difficult categories of, there's things like abuse, and there's things like murder, and there's things like other elements that I don't want to get into that are in this book that I think will make it very unpleasant to read. Yet Delilah Dawson is good at making the book interesting. And she is a type of author that I can disagree with. Like, I disagree with a lot of what she says and agree with some of what she says, but I disagree with a lot of what she says, and yet I'm still super into her books because she does it in such an entertaining way. And such a unique way. I call all of her books visceral. Her and Chuck Wendig get the points for visceral authors, where I feel what I'm reading. So I'm interested in reading this, although this is going to be a very tough read. The second book on my list is a contemporary book by Fredrik Backman called Anxious People. I've read several Fredrik Backman novels and novellas. I thought that Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer, superb. I thought that A Man Called Ova, superb. I thought that My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry and Britt Marie were pretty good. I thought Beartown was too much to handle. I was like, I read that book and it was just, I could not keep reading the next 2 books because that was way too much to read. Yet, I intend to read them eventually, but it's been a couple years because, whoo, that book was heavy. But I've read some of our others, and so I saw this at a used bookstore, and I picked it up. And part of what makes this interesting is a couple years ago, this won the Goodreads Choice, or this was up for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and it lost by 5 votes. It lost by 5 votes to the Midnight Library, and I was shocked by how close, because that was there were a lot of people that voted in that. There were tens of thousands of people that voted, and yet it lost by 5 votes. So I eventually will read Midnight Library just so I can compare the two, but I'm very interested in reading this. It looks like a much lighter Fredrik Backman novel than, say, his Beartown novels, so I'm hoping I'll enjoy this one. Next on my list is a straight-up mystery novel by Agatha Christie called Halloween Party. And it's weird because it has like an apostrophe, so it's like Halloween Party. I have gotten into Agatha Christie because of my former roommate. He and I, when we were living together about a year ago, he and I suggested a book swap idea where I give him fantasy and Star Wars novels to read, and he gave me Agatha Christie mysteries to read. And they were all from this type of printing, this kind of trade paperback design. And so he gave me a bunch of them to read, and I would read about one a month, and I loved them. I thought they were brilliant. I thought they were superb. And now I haven't been able to read them for about 6 or 8 months because I just haven't had any. Ever since I moved away, I finished all the ones he had, and now I didn't have any more of my own, and you can't find these in used bookstores. I have been able to find teeny tiny mass market, not even mass market, like smaller than mass market paperbacks of her books, but I don't like the way those feel in my hands when I'm reading, and I really like this design, and I eventually want to collect all of these. But I'm a big Hercule Poirot fan. I love the books, and I love the movies and TV shows that have come out about him, so I can't wait to read this one. I think it's going to be fun. I should have read this in October, but I didn't get it till just a couple weeks ago. So this is on my list for December. Now we're getting into the category that I have the most books of, and that's sci-fi. Trying to give new sci-fi standalones and series a shot, and the first sci-fi book I have is Artemis by Andy Weir. Now, a lot of people have said this is Andy Weir's weakest novel, but most of them say it's still a pretty good read, and I'm interested in it because I loved The Martian, absolutely loved it, one of my top favorite books the year that I read it, and I really think that this is a type of sci-fi I'm more interested in reading more in the future. And I think that Andy Weir just has a way of making his characters feel just so entertaining. So I'm really excited to read this one. It's short, which is nice. It's a nice quick read. And then after I read this, I'll eventually get to Project Hail Mary, which I'm more excited for that. But I told myself I can't read that until I read this because I've had this on my shelves for a long time. Because I found it at a used bookstore. It's kind of beat up. It's kind of curling at the ends, and there's some drawings on the inside. But hey, I got it at a used bookstore. Next, the next sci-fi book I have is another Kevin J. Anderson book, although this time he co-wrote it with Doug Beeson. It's called Ill Wind. This is a science fiction book. It's kind of got a little bit of an apocalyptic kind of thing to it. It's about this big oil spill that happens. It's the biggest oil spill ever, and it causes this race to get natural resources from different places. And I haven't read too much of that write-up because I don't want to spoil myself. And I love Kevin's writing. I love his sci-fi and fantasy books. I am totally on board for any project he's going to work on, and I'm interested in seeing how I like him working with Doug Beeson if I want to try reading their other collaborations, and also seeing if this will be a new sci-fi standalone that I'll fall in love with. So that's also on my list. This is one of the tomes. This and The Violence are the only tomes on my list this month, though they just barely meet my criteria of being just over 500 pages. Then we have Asimovs Foundation. This is the first in the Foundation series. This is another book that I've not read anything about because I want to go in blind. This is, a classic. They've recently made an Apple TV show about it. There's all these sequels, then some other people carried on the sequels. It's been around for a while, and it's synonymous with classic science fiction. And so I picked up the book at a used bookstore, and I was like, I want to read it, but I don't want to know anything going in because I really want to be surprised by this. I remember watching some book reviews. I believe it was from Murphy Napier and Daniel Green several years ago, but I don't remember anything about it, so I don't want to spoil myself again. So I'm really interested in reading this one. The last sci-fi book, pure sci-fi book I have is called Honor Arrington, The Honor of the Queen. This is the second Honor Arrington novel. I read the first one about a month-ish ago, loved it. I didn't think it was the best science fiction novel I'd ever read, but it was a superb start for Honor Arrington. Introduced this great new character. I loved having a goody two-shoes that I could root for. Normally the goody two-shoes characters are put down. Here I was able to cheer for the goody two-shoes. And so I am interested to see if I keep cheering for her or if she starts turning more rogue. I am interested to see if this becomes a big epic series or if it days with little quick adventures, I'd be fine either way. This seems kind of like this, from what I've seen on my shelves, this looks like the sci-fi version of the Dresden Files, where they start out little serialized, a little quick novel here or there, and then they get bigger and tell epic stories as they go along. That's my prediction, although I haven't finished either series yet. So I'm really interested in reading this. In my last category is my Star Trek category. I keep my Star Trek category separate from science fiction because of a couple reasons. One, because Star Trek is more common in that I know the characters, I know the places, I know the plots, I know everything about it, so it's really quick reads, and also they tend to be shorter because of the way they design the books. They tend to be shorter books, and so Star Trek is also media tie-in fiction where you're tying into existing material, whereas science fiction, like original science fiction novels, they have to come up with everything themselves, all the world building, all everything else. So I view them in two separate categories, and so I have two Star Trek novels. The first one is called Raise the Dawn by David R. George. I've read a lot of the first four Typhon Pack novels as I'm recording this, and I'm about to start the fifth one, and this is the sixth. And I've thought some of the books have been superb, some have been awful. Some of them good, some of them not so good. And so it's been all over the place. But what makes this series so good as a whole is that it follows beloved Star Trek characters and ships and whatnot. And I'm a completionist, want to complete this series, and also just want to understand the post-Nemesis universe more so I can talk about it more, and so this is on my list to read. And the final book of the month to read, it's not like the final book that I'll be reading it like in the timeline of the month, it's just the last one I'm talking about here, is the new Star Trek, the original series book, Harm's Way by David Mack, coming out in December. I'm so excited for this book. This book is and a Star Trek the Original Series novel, but what makes it different is it's going to tie into another David Mack series. If you know Star Trek books, you know David Mack. And if you know David Mack, you know he did the Vanguard series. And Harm's Way will have loose connections to the Vanguard series, which I'm very excited to read. For one, because I'm interested to see how he weaves it together. I've read the first four Vanguard series, and there's four more I haven't read, plus a novella. But I intend to finish the other four next year. But I've read the first four, and I've had, okay. I thought each one I was like, it's okay, it's bad. It's okay, it's okay. Like, they have never risen to good or great. So I'm interested to see if this one reignites my excitement for reading more Vanguard novels. But David Mack usually delivers on a lot of his projects, and I haven't read too many TOS books from him outside of Vanguard and crossover series, so I'm interested to see how he handles the TOS characters. And that's one of the only two Star Trek books we got this year. We only got two Star Trek books this year, Second Self and Harm's Way. That is appalling. That is appalling. Simon & Schuster and Gallery Books should be ashamed of themselves. But I'm still happy we're getting at least those two. We could be getting 0. We should be getting 12. That's the number, 12. But we're getting those two. One we already got, I already read and reviewed, and then Harm's Way. And then we have more coming out next year. And please schedule more in the future. We want more. So that's my TBR for the month of December. If you are reading any books, let me know in the comments down below what you're reading this month. And if you've read any of these, let me know your thoughts. Do you like them? Do you hate them? Do you feel indifferent? Let me know those thoughts. And if you're interested in reading those books, let me know any questions you might have. And I'll try to answer them if I can, within reason. But until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.